Hello, my name is Diane, and today I want to talk about all the books I did not read in 2023. By that, I mean anything that at some point during the year I put on some type of TBR list, and then for whatever reason didn't read it. Either I just didn't have time for it that month, the month that I was planning to read it, or I've lost interest in it since I put it on a TBR. So some of these are books that I own that I am still planning to read. Some of them were just on a TBR and I didn't get to them, or I decided I didn't really want to read them anymore. And then a lot of these are new releases. Every month I do a list of new releases that are coming out the next month that I'm most looking forward to, think sound the most interesting. All of those end up on my TBR, although not all of them end up getting read by me for a bunch of different reasons. So I'll talk a little bit about each one, but I'm mostly just going to go through this as a list. Otherwise, this is going to be far too long. So starting off, I have some nonfiction books. All of these are books that I own. And for these, I have Einstein a Life by Dennis Bryan, Draw the Lightning Down by Michael Bryan Schiffer, Thank You for Arguing by Jay Heinrichs, Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. I'm actually halfway through this one. I've been halfway through it for a very long time. I'm enjoying it. I just haven't prioritized my nonfiction, unfortunately. The Starbucks Experience by Joseph A. McKelly. New Venture Management by Donald F. Karatko and Jeffrey S. Hornsby. Consider the Lobster by David Foster Wallace. And Trains Across the Continent by Rudolph Daniels. For other books that I own, most of these I've had for a very long time, an embarrassingly long time, and I haven't read them because I read a lot of books from the library. I generally prioritize those over the books that I own because I only have them for a limited time, especially if they're a popular book and they're in high demand. I can't just keep renewing my loan if I'm not done with the book from the library. I have to return it and then wait for my turn again. So my owned books this year have really gotten put on the back burner as I've read other things. For books that I own, I have The Poetic Edda, The Wise Man's Sphere by Patrick Rothfuss, which is the sequel to The Name of the Wind. I'm about 200 pages into this, and I set it down a long time ago to read something else and haven't picked it back up yet. The Vagrant by Peter Newman. This is another one I read the beginning of. I forget how far into it I am, but I set it down to read something else and just haven't gotten back to it. It's not even that long. I don't know why I haven't just finished it. Chronicles of the Black Company by Glenn Cook. This is the first 3 books in the Black Company series. The Dwarves by Marcus Heights, another one that I read the beginning of and then set down and never picked back up again. I don't normally do that with books. I don't know why I have so many books I own that I've just set down and abandoned for a very long time. The better part of a year at least for each of these. So I should really finish those. I should prioritize at least those 3 that I've started in the beginning of next year, if not the end of this year. The Once and Future King by T.H. White. This is 4 novels combined into one of an Arthurian retelling, and I think there is a 5th book that was published later on separately. Green Mansions by William Henry Hudson. I have no idea where this book came from in my collection or even what genre it is. I think it's a romance, which is why I haven't been eager to pick it up. I'm just not a romance reader. But I've also seen it categorized as fantasies, so I'm not really sure where this falls or what it's about. But the only way to figure it out is to just read it. I also have 3 books in a series, The Thief's Gamble, The Swordsman's Oath, and The Gambler's Fortune by Juliet E. McKenna. So those are all the ones I own that I still haven't finished. I did a really good job last year at getting through my owned books that I hadn't read, and then once I got to just a small amount of them, I stopped prioritizing them this year, even though I thought I could finish them up quickly. That very early on in the year became untrue. I'm still looking forward to all of them. So hopefully next year I'll have read all of my owned books. For other fiction that was on a TBR at some point during the year that I just didn't make time for or lost interest in, I have Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard and Gilded by Marissa Meyer. These are both young adult. I've read from these authors before and I like their writing and I think the stories sound interesting, but for the most part, I'm just too old for young adult now. So I may someday, if the mood strikes, pick these up, but probably not just because of the age category. Malice by John Gwynne. I'm hopefully going to get to this early on next year. Later by Stephen King. This has been on and off my TBR. I don't read much horror anymore. I used to when I was younger, and I just don't really click with it quite as much anymore. So I'm probably never going to read this, to be honest, just because of the genre. I'll Be Home for Hanukkah by K.K. Hendon. This was a carryover, I think, from last year when I read a lot of holiday books. I threw in a couple Hanukkah books with all of the very many Christmas books I read, and I just was so burnt out on holiday books because I read, I think, 25 of them. I did one every day in December for every day leading up to Christmas. And by the time I got to this, I just was so over it. So I don't think I'm going to be reading this. I don't plan to read any holiday books this year. Empire of Exiles by Erin M. Evans and The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. Both of these I was reading from the library, and I had started them. I was enjoying them, but there were a lot of people waiting for them, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to finish them in the 2 or 3 weeks, however long I had them for, so I just returned them, and I've been waiting until I feel like I really have time to actually finish them. Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. I started this on audiobook. I actually tried to listen to it twice, and I just wasn't enjoying the narration for some reason. I don't know what about it that wasn't working for me, but I just found it really hard to absorb the story with the narration as it was. So I'm gonna try and read this physically at some point. I liked the Farseer trilogy, so I've heard even better things about the Live Ship Traders trilogy, so I'm looking forward to this. Just need to find a format that's gonna work for me. Odd Interlude by Dean Koontz. This is book 4.5 of the Odd Thomas series, which I loved the first book, and then the following 3 I lost interest in progressively. So I'm planning to read Odd Interlude to see if I can get back into the series to finish it, or if it's just time to call it quits and finally let it go. I still love the first book. I really enjoy this series, and I love the character of Odd Thomas. And then I have new releases. These all came out in 2023. They were on one of my new release lists for whatever month they came out. So I have Phaedra by Laura Shepperson. I think this is a Greek myth retelling, which I love mythology retellings and fairy tale retellings, but Greek mythology has never really captivated me. Barrow of Winter by H.M. Long. I, for some reason, didn't realize that this was part of a series. I have heard that you can read this on its own and it'll be fine. And I've done that with other series before, just read them out of order and didn't have a problem. But I just don't think I'm going to read this. I think I've lost interest in it since it first came out. The Phantom Scientist by Robin Cousin. This is a graphic novel and it sounds really cool. I just don't know if I'll ever get around to it. The Great Big Demon Hunting Agency by Peter Oxley. This sounds like a fun urban fantasy type of story, but urban fantasy has been extremely hit or miss for me. We Come with Vengeance by H.D. Murley. This seems kind of steampunk to me. I don't know how accurate that is. That's just my assumption about it. And I love the idea of steampunk, but I've never really connected with a steampunk. I think I like more like sci-fi western, which in my head is a little bit similar, although I know they're not the same thing at all. But I think this feels like it's going to be more steampunky, and I haven't really connected with that setting. Paradise 1 by David Wellington. This is one that I definitely still want to read. It is a sci-fi horror thriller suspense. I don't know what specifically they're calling it, but it's just very long. It's almost 700 pages. And while I think that's fine, I don't have a problem reading very long books. I've been prioritizing more like 400 and 500 page books this year over 700 page ones, just because I feel like I can get through more of them in a shorter amount of time than reading 700 plus page books. The Basilisk Throne by Greg Keyes. I don't even remember what this is about, to be honest. I know it's a fantasy. That's all I remember about it. The Cleaving by Juliet E. McKenna. This is an Arthurian retelling. I have some other books by Juliet E. McKenna, but although I'm not sure if I like her writing yet because I haven't read them yet. But I like Arthurian retellings, and I know that this follows the female characters in that story. The Blighted Stars by Megan O'Keefe. This is a space opera, which I love the idea of a space opera, but every time I read them, I just don't connect with them at all. I don't know what it is about space operas. They're so appealing to me, and they just don't do anything for me. I never connect with them. So I have a few space operas coming up on this list, and all of them sound really cool and appealing, but I also feel like I'm just gonna be disappointed because I always am with space operas, and that's a bias that I know that I have for whatever reason. Battery Life by Brendan Gilpatrick and Gregory Lang. This is another sci-fi that sounds a little on the goofier, quirkier side. Sounds like it's going to be a little bit humorous for the situation. Hammer of Fate by G.N. Gudjian. This is another one. I don't remember anything about this book. I have no idea what it's about. So I probably am not going to read it because I don't even remember it. Blade of Dream by Daniel Abraham. Daniel Abraham is one half of the author of The Expanse, James S. A. Corey. I forget the name of the other author, but I didn't like the Expanse series at all. It's very popular. Again, a space opera. I didn't like it at all, but I've heard really good things, particularly about Daniel Abraham. But I wanted to try each of them individually to see if I liked their individual works more than their combined works. I don't know if I'll specifically read from this series from Daniel Abraham, but I do still want to try something from him. Emergent Properties by Amy Ogden. This is a sci-fi, and the main character is an AI, which sounds weird and interesting. The Phoenix King by Aparna Verma. This is a fantasy. I don't remember the specifics about it, but I know it's a fantasy. I do remember this one. I just don't remember specifically what the plot is. Where Peace is Lost by Valerie Valdez, another first book in a space opera series. So if you like space operas, there's a few here for you to check out if you haven't heard of them yet. The Hexologist by Josiah Bancroft. Haven't heard a lot about this, but what I have heard has been very positive, so I am planning to get to this very soon. The Navigating Fox by Christopher Rowe. I actually just got a copy of this. It's I think a short story or a novella, and it sounds kind of fairy tale-like. I don't know if it's based on anything, but it sounds interesting, and I haven't heard too much about it. Shield Maiden by Sharon Emmerichs. This is like a Beowulf retelling. I don't know if it's really a retelling. It takes place in the world of Beowulf. I know Beowulf is in the story, but it follows his niece, I think. Savis Corax Deals with the Dead by KJ Parker. I've heard really good things about this. It sounds like a really fun story. Kind of dark, kind of lighthearted maybe, I'm assuming. But this is the first book in a trilogy, and the whole trilogy is out. He released one book each month. So within 3 months, the whole trilogy was published, which is great if you hate waiting for sequels. He did not make anybody wait very long for any of these. The Jinbot of Sanaport by Samit Basu. I think this is like a sci-fi Arabian-inspired story. I know there's a monkey robot, which sounds funny to me. I don't really know what the rest of the story is about, though. The Bone Roots by Gabriella Houston. This is a Slavic folktale-inspired story following two mothers who I think have lost their children or are looking for their children. Lilith by Nikki Marmory. This is a retelling of the story of Lilith from her perspective. These Burning Stars by Bethany Jacobs. A sci-fi, maybe another space opera. Tonight I Burn by Catherine J. Adams. This is about like a witch who her group is responsible for patrolling the Vale, and one of her sisters goes missing. She goes through and doesn't come back, so she goes and looks for her, which is against the rules. They're only ever supposed to go one at a time. The premise of this sounds really interesting to me, but I also know it's categorized as a romance, which is a turnoff for me. I'm fine with romance being part of a story, but I just don't like when it's the main focus of the story most of the time. It's just not the genre that appeals to me. The Star in the Strange Moon by Constance Sayers. This is about a movie star or an actress in a film who gets pulled into the film, and she's in a horror film, so she's trying to play her part and hopefully survive. And then in more modern day, there's a man who has heard about this story. It's very popular, this woman who went missing, and he goes looking for her, and I think also gets pulled into the film. And finally, Good Girls Don't Die by Christina Henry. This follows 3 women who know that something about their life is off. Their life isn't their life. They're in some very bizarre situation. I don't really know what the twist in this is going to be or how the stories are intertwined. That's really all I ever knew about this, but it sounds like it could be really interesting depending on what the twist, the reveal of what's going on with them actually is. So those are all of the books that I put on a TBR at some point during the year and ended up not reading. I'd say probably half of these I'll still read at some point in the future, and at least half of these I've just don't have enough interest in them. I think they all still sound interesting. I just don't know if they sound interesting enough that I'm ever going to prioritize them, especially when I'm constantly adding things every month to my overall TBR. These may just end up getting bumped off of the list for me. Let me know if you've read any of these, if I should prioritize any of these. I'd love to hear if anyone's read them and really loved them. Otherwise, that's all for me today. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.